I'm curious what your thoughts are on where higher education is as that certifying mechanism today.
Well, it's less and less important. There's one Emergent Ventures winner, I think he's 17, and using AI, he built a nuclear fusion reactor in his bedroom. That certifies him. And a very well known venture capitalist did a podcast with this fellow about how he did it. That's something other than a college degree. It's worth a lot more, I would say. And more people know that if all you have is a degree from even a Harvard, MIT, Stanford, like you'll get a good job, but a good job is not what it's about. It's about changing the world and being a difference maker. So have faith in the young at a younger and younger level. And if you do that, that's one of the clues or keys, I think, to having impact.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Liberty Ventures podcast. I'm Alexander McCobin, founder and CEO of Liberty Ventures, where we're building the ecosystem of values aligned business leaders, investors, executives, and entrepreneurs who are committed to a free and prosperous future. And I'm just thrilled to be talking today with Professor Tyler Cowen from George Mason University, who some of you may know also from his blog, Marginal Revolution, or from Emergent Ventures that he founded years ago, supporting incredibly innovative projects across the world. Tyler, it was great seeing you in Fairfax a few weeks ago, and thanks so much for joining the podcast today.
My pleasure. We had a very good Chinese lunch at Mama Chang's, right?
And that's one of your passions, actually, right? I think finding really authentic, delicious ethnic food.
And regional Chinese food is in the ascendancy now in the United States, I would say. It's a good thing to be eating a lot of.
So, you've given this tip elsewhere before, but for anyone who hasn't heard, what's your best advice to find the most authentic regional Chinese food now?
Well, there's two ways to do it. One is to know a lot about food. That's great if you can manage it. But the better way is to know a lot about people and know whom to ask and whom to believe. And just look inside a restaurant and are the people taking the food seriously? You actually don't want them to be too happy in a Chinese restaurant. You want them to look a little grumpy and very focused on the food and maybe shouting at each other. And then the place is more likely to be good. So knowing about people can substitute for knowing about food.
I wonder if that's a general principle beyond food to a lot of other areas of life, understanding people in order to understand their commitment to their craft or to other industries as well.
I believe it is. So if you want to know, well, what are the hot new areas today for scientific progress? One way is to try to learn a whole large amount about science. It's not a waste of your time. But another way is to learn about people and then see where are the smartest young people going? What are they doing? And draw inferences from that. That's not a perfect method, but I think you'll actually get further than if you're just out there trying to study science with your head buried in a textbook.
Now, is this something that you've always believed or something you've learned over the course of your life and career?
I think I've learned it over the course of my life, but I've always believed it in the sense that I had some inclinations to think that other people were efficient aggregators of information. And there were keys to unlock that. And even when I was pretty young, I would be trying to work those keys rather than just try to like read every book possible, which no one can do, right?
No, and you're incredibly well read. So, but you still prioritize understanding people. And as you said, I like this approach, finding where the smartest people are going to understand what's most authentic, what has the most potential for progress. So, at this point, what do you look for to really understand if someone is one of the smartest people, and try to follow what they're doing and the trends from them?
Well, if someone is, say, 17 years old, and right before our chat now, I had a call with a 17-year-old who lives in Canada and has a remarkable command of detail in some scientific area and can talk about it with command of theory, facts, uh, they're pretty good, basically. And then you ask them questions about some other things and see how they can handle that. Do they have any breadth? How much determination do they show? What I see right now is so many super talented young people going into computational biology, robotics, and then I would say AI. The AI thing at this point is obvious. You don't need to track young people. But computational biology, biomedicine, longevity research, robotics, I've been talked into those, I would say, by the young people I see doing them. They know better than I do. So I'm like, well, if it convinced you, it should also convince me.
I don't know if I mentioned Michael Gibson in 1517 when we were at lunch, but he's one of our advisors and often talks about the importance of hyperfluency in young people that they choose to invest in. The ability to really talk circles around people because they're so intelligent and understand their area so much. This sounds very similar to what you're describing for understanding how intelligent someone is and their grasp of the topic.
Yes, Michael and I have conferred on these questions, and there have been a fair number of people that we've each independently decided to support. I suspect using broadly the same metrics. And Michael, as you probably know, is one of the founders of the Teal Fellows program, which pays people to drop out of school, which is not what my work does per se. Uh, and that's been super successful.
So let's talk about your work right now because you're a professor at George Mason and you've got this amazing blog, Marginal Revolution, that you've been running for 20 years. And you're also running Emergent Ventures that people may or may not have heard about. And they do seem to, in some ways, diverge from each other. But I know for you, they actually intersect. I'd love if you can explain the genesis of Emergent Ventures from everything else you've been doing and where you see all of your work going.
Emergent Ventures is part of the Mercatus Center, which is a nonprofit research center housed at George Mason University, where I'm professor and I'm faculty director of Mercatus. One of my core views is that our world is far too bureaucratized, and of course, that includes government as the main villain, but it also includes a lot of private philanthropy. I'm sure you've had these experiences of foundations being too slow, too bureaucratic, too risk averse. And I thought we needed some ways of giving away money that were quicker, more streamlined, way lower overhead, less risk averse, and would take chances on very young people and consider pleas for very small grants. But if someone's 17, say $5,000 can really help them a lot. So I set up Emergent Ventures. Our founding gift, you could call it, was from the Teal Foundation. And that was, I think, now 6 years ago. And we now have over 800 winners. So it's become quite a large project.
I imagine you came up with this idea from your experience with these philanthropies and wanting to come up with a better solution. But say a little bit more about the way that you've set up Emergent Ventures and the kinds of grants that you give out, who you're looking for, and what some of the grantees are doing with it, because these are really exciting projects.
Well, if you Google Emergent Ventures, you can read our application form. And that probably tells you more than anything I would say. But it's basically one page, no letters of recommendation. We never ask where you went to school. It's just who are you and what's your idea? And the idea literally can be anything. So we support large numbers of teenagers, people who want to get started in science, people who want to start companies, people who start nonprofits. We have well over 200 winners in India, which is a very entrepreneurial place right now. We have some very unusual winners. So there's one fellow who more or less was considered the world's greatest hitchhiker, which is a designation you don't normally think about. And now, with some assistance from us, he's turned that into a very successful business. So we'll consider a request really for anything. We want to see that it will have impact and be something creative. And we also look, will the person maybe someday help out others in the broader community?
And from our conversation before, what I was surprised by was how much support you're interested in giving, that you look for the right talent in any industry, any field, but that you've told me that you see blogging, or podcasting, and sharing ideas more broadly in society as a really open area that you're actually seeing some great young talent develop in too.
Podcasting is still underrated. One of our early winners was a fellow named Dwarkesh Patel. I think when I first met Dwarkesh, he was 18. I would guess now he's 23 or 24. And his podcast is now rated in the top 10. And in turn, he was named, Time Magazine does a list, 100 most influential people in AI. He made the list because so many of his episodes are about AI. And his numbers, they're just off the charts, phenomenally high. And he's done great. He's a person with impact.
Most people think that we have too many podcasts out there right now and that we're kind of feeding it by doing one here. But why do you think there's still more potential with that?
Podcasts actually influence people. And this is shocking in a way, but no one has to listen, right? You listen because you want to listen. So the selection bias for your audience is truly everyone who's there cares in some way. And very few media get you that. And I think if you have a very smart podcast, that part of the market is not oversaturated. In fact, there aren't that many very smart podcasts. Don't focus on your number of listeners, focus on the quality. It may be hard to support yourself, but that's partly where grants come in, right? Mercatus supports a podcast by David Beckworth on macro and the Fed. It's the most influential money macro podcast I think that there is. And the quality of listeners, I can't name names, but the quality is a double plus, I'll just say. And you can imagine the names on your own.
And that actually sounds a lot to me like what we look for in early stage startups, what kind of traction they get. People can choose which companies they're going to buy from. You want to focus on high quality early customers, and you're tracking the traction with listeners, and especially the quality of listeners, not just the quality, because they're choosing which podcast they listen to.
That's right. And like this Fed podcast, on its own, it would never make enough money to be sustainable, keeping, a highly skilled person able to support a family and pay rent. But that's why you support things.
100%. So, what's your hope for what Emergent Ventures is going to do over the coming years?
I try not to get too airy fairy about it. I just consider it one case at a time. Our very first winner, Timothy Milovanov, when he started, he was an academic in the state of Ohio. He's from Ukraine. We gave him a grant to write about the Ukrainian economy. He ended up appointed as economy minister under Zelensky, had a big impact. He was our very first person, but I never would have predicted that. I was just focused, on Timothy. Is he great? Is he smart? Is he thoughtful? He directs the Kiev School of Economics, which is a highly important institution in Ukraine, and has been mega successful at multiple levels, not just one.
I think that's such an amazing impact and example of what you're doing, especially since, as you said, you've given out 800 grants now and you've seen thousands of applications. And it seems, well, I know that from talking with you, that you're taking a big tent approach, wanting to support a lot of opportunities and individuals to see which ones will really rise to the top and have the greatest impact. And you've always taken that kind of big tent approach. Whereas some people want to have a closed tent, they want to exclude people from who they work with. But why have you always believed in the big tent approach to what you're doing?
I think you're born with a particular temperament for most of us, maybe all of us, and you're not going to change that much. So you want to end up doing things that match to your temperament. It's also how you think about like talent and matching talent to projects. And I think I have a lot of equanimity about my losses. Maybe it comes from being a chess player early in life where there's always someone better than you, right? Who beats you. So if you're supporting, like right now, 800 people or 800 plus, maybe 50 of those will have true impact. The others will do good things, but like real, true marginal impact, 50. Like your loss ratio is pretty high. You'd better be at peace with that or it's going to drive you crazy. And I just think I have the kind of temperament where I'm at peace with that.
I think it's not just temperament, though. I think it's a really effective strategy, as we were talking about. That since you know you're going to have a high failure rate there, people who will do good things but not have the significant impact that you want, you don't know which people are going to be the ones who have that tremendous impact in the beginning. So it's better to take a big tent approach, bring them in, and work with them to see who rises to the top.
And whatever is my biggest mistake, however large it may be, I'm sure it is some person I didn't fund rather than, oh, I wasted X number of dollars on, Joe Smith. It's what I didn't do that's my huge mistake.
Have you ever gone back and tried to work with someone or support them after realizing that you should have supported before?
Well, there's plenty of people we've turned down and they come back with something better and then we say yes. But if I tell someone no, uh, typically I don't have further contact if they don't come back with a different proposal. And if they do something great, I may or may not hear about them. So I don't even know what my biggest mistake is. I just know that I have it.
Fair enough.
And it may not be realized yet. So say I turn down a 17-year-old in chemistry and that 17-year-old wins a Nobel Prize at age 53. Like that could be my biggest mistake, but I may not even be around to see it.
And hopefully they will still go on to have that impact and you'll just realize that you weren't a part of it.
And hopefully I'll still be around to see it. That's the real point, right?
And what I love about the way that you're developing this is it is very network based. You told me that one of the first tests for people to even come to Emergent Ventures is discovering it. And a lot of it's from following Marginal Revolution or knowing other people involved. But as you said, you want people who are getting these grants to stay connected and help others out and help build this network.
Yes, on purpose, we do zero advertising, But once someone wins, we put them in touch with all the other winners. And a lot of people are working together because of the network, or they get jobs that way, or move somewhere, they help each other out, sleep on each other's sofas, whatever.
Again, in today's world, most people think that it's easier to network than ever before and that people are able to build relationships quickly because of all of our virtual telecommunications and so forth. But you're leaning into the importance of high trusting, closed off networks, and not really closed off, but more tight knit networks. And wonder if you could share a little bit about why you think that's the future.
Well, networking is both easier and harder. Obviously, there's the internet, AI on its way. Uh, so you can get in touch with people, but so can anyone else. So, how you're certified has gone up in value greatly. So, if you have a credible means of certifying people, which in various ways, including Emergent Ventures, I try to produce, the value of that to the world can be quite high. And I think your own experience on different projects reflects the same. So, precisely because there's so many options out there, who is vouching for you really matters.
And you're right. That's even one of the premises behind the Liberty Ventures network. We want to create a close knit network of values aligned business leaders that they know they're able to develop a strong relationship with because they're a part of this network. They share the same values, they've got similar commitments to each other.
And the value of that, can be very high.
Being a professor as well, I'm curious what your thoughts are on where higher education is as that certifying mechanism today.
Well, it's less and less important. So, again, I talk to quite a few very smart young people every week, just every single week of my life. And I hear their goals, their plans, their dreams. And, almost all of them still want to go to the best school possible. That to me is encouraging about like US higher ed, or you could say, Oxford, Cambridge as well. Uh, but more and more, they don't view it as certifying them. They realize they need other things. Like there's one Emergent Ventures winner, I think he's 17, but he's around that age. And using AI, he built a nuclear fusion reactor in his bedroom, not at a very large scale. That certifies him. And a very well known venture capitalist did a podcast with this fellow about how he did it. And that's something other than a college degree. It's worth a lot more, I would say. And more people know that if all you have is a degree from even Harvard, MIT, Stanford, like you'll get a good job, but a good job is not what it's about. It's about changing the world and being a difference maker. And you need a lot more for that.
You need to actually show results in order to be able to do that.
That's right. And if you can show some kind of result at a young age, you look at areas where we can measure quality perfectly, like chess. Like you won, you lost, there's no ambiguity. You have a numerical rating. We see top chess players get younger, younger, younger. There's a player on one of the Olympiad teams right now, 9 years old, like a grandmaster, I think is the age. That's, was never possible before.
That's crazy.
So the areas where you cannot easily certify quality, I believe you should infer the people doing great things are also becoming younger and younger. It's just a little hard to see. So have faith in the young at a younger and younger level. And if you do that, that's one of the clues or keys, I think, to having impact.
Well, I think one of the things happening now too is that more areas are becoming quantifiable, so we're able to evaluate how effective they are there. Even going back to podcasting, now we can see the quality of people's ideas and their ability to resonate with others because we can see in real time how many people are listening to them and even who's listening to them.
That's correct. And again, Dwarkesh, with his successes, those started, he would be like about 20 when that started. That's super young. Like the world doesn't care. The world's just like, is this a good podcast? And he's had on his podcast Mark Zuckerberg as a solo guest, Tony Blair, who basically does not do anything. And Tony Blair did Dwarkesh's podcast, even though Dwarkesh then was 23. That's also a certification. So Dwarkesh is from University of Texas at Austin. It's a very good school, but it's not MIT, it's not Stanford. Like no one cares. His podcast is great, and that does the work for him.
So that is such a great lesson for other young people to go and try to do amazing things because they can. There are other young people doing that.
They inspire each other. It's remarkable. And they have such tightly knit networks. Uh, and if I get on a call with a 17-year-old, not a random 17-year-old, but just someone who's applied, the chance that that 17-year-old knows three other 17-year-olds who know me is like 75 to 80%. And that I find very striking.
That's incredible. But I want to pivot to not just talking about young people, but let's talk about more seasoned people, especially business leaders, because you work with a lot of, of incredible business leaders as well right now. And I'm curious if you can share what trends you're hearing from them in terms of what they're concerned about and where they see things going, especially in regards to your work and their support for Emergent Ventures.
Well, there's a lot of different facets behind that question. I think business leaders as a whole, if I could generalize, they're very concerned about the state of American politics. And I mean that in a nonpartisan way. Wherever they may be on the spectrum, it's like, well, something has gone wrong, is a very common view. I think they're very bullish on American and also global innovation, but especially in this country. People see, in terms of innovation, this country as having taken a big relative step forward compared to 10 years ago. That's very bullish. More and more, they believe in young talent. And I think more and more of them see the importance of India as a both current and future center of global talent. And India, in my view, really cannot be overrated. Most Americans are still quite asleep on this.
Why can't it be overrated? Because you're right. Most people are overlooking the impact of India right now.
Well, obviously, the numbers are high, right, in the population. Internet access is surprisingly good, given what a poor country India can be. There's enough English spoken, by no means everyone, but it is, and English is a language there. That is critically important. And just in terms of ambition and aspiration, most people in India do not take prosperity for granted. They understand how hard they have to fight. The number of parents who truly value education and have the attitude that they'll kick the kid's butt across the room if they need to. There are just many positive factors for India. You can see, you look at the top Silicon Valley CEOs, Google, Microsoft. This is in America. We're not a country hurting for A plus CEOs. You know this, right? From your own work currently. So the fact that people can come from India and outcompete every possible American CEO for top jobs, it tells you something. You can look also at politics. I'm not saying you have to like the views of all these people, but PM of the UK, Indian background, right? PM of Ireland, Indian background. One of our two candidates, 50% Indian background. Wife of J.D. Vance, Indian background. Number two Republican candidate who did not win, uh, Indian background. That's a lot, right? And like 10 years ago, even 8 years ago, you could say 6 years, like none of this had happened. Like, where did that all come from? Like, you need to wake up and realize, like, that is one wave, but it's only one wave, and a lot more is coming.
And so, what should people do to take account of that?
Well, it depends who they are, what they do. For me, it means look for talent in India. We have a whole India branch of Emergent Ventures with about 250 winners who are awesome. Uh, if you're in higher education, try to attract graduate students, faculty from India, people who work on topics related to India. Imagine you're in Great Britain and the year's 1900. And so let's say, like, you only care about Great Britain. You still should be intensely interested in America because that's going to shape so much of your future. So, what America was to Great Britain in 1900, India is to us today. So, you'd better give a damn about it. What exactly you should do depends on your job, right? Your interests. But almost certainly there is something you should do about India. And just a simple initial step, if you haven't been, go there and have some sense of what's happening. Like, if nothing else, it will be a fun trip as well. Just to not be a total stranger when it comes to India.
So that's really great advice. And when we were talking last, you know that one of the things that we want to do with the Liberty Ventures Network is get more business leaders who understand the value of capitalism as a system and the importance of this to human flourishing to speak out more in defense of capitalism and to explain what they're doing. What would be your advice to any business leaders who are listening that may be wavering on doing so as to why they should consider doing that?
Well, I think cancel culture is largely dead. We haven't quite realized that yet. But if you want to say something, odds are you can just say it and do it and get away with it. And the returns to courage are high. And other CEOs, some who are already vocal, some who are silent, but they will respect you more, want to work with you. It will attract talent to your company. And this is a very important factor. Many people overlook it. If you are vocal in a good way for the values you truly believe in a reasonable way, but with strength and confidence, you will attract a better quality and class of employee, and that will improve your business. And those better employees will themselves, in turn, over time, attract better employees. So the kind of nonsense you have had in some companies, I don't want to name names, but we all know these anecdotes. The chance that will happen to you is much lower if you have in advance proactively taken out a good public stance in favor of the values you believe in. I cannot stress how critical that will be moving forward. It's a scramble for talent. Talent cares about values typically. They want good values. They don't want to work with a bunch of nonsense or cancel culture people. And you're the one who's got to set the tone. No one else. It falls on you.
And an important point you just made there is that business leaders should do this early in their businesses, and it's better to start sooner than later because you don't want to surprise people with a change in values perceptually or anything like that. It's if you stick to your values.
Exactly. And the media jumps on you if they perceive you as a flip flopper. Like, oh, something happened, you had to change your tune. Now you're saying this, then you said that. Eyes roll, and it's like, well, this person will say whatever. But if you're out there in front, like Brian Armstrong in Coinbase, he was one of the very first. It's gone very, very well for him. And at the time, everyone was so upset. There was some negative media coverage. He was called different names. It's gone great for him. And he's now so respected. He's been a great leader. He's attracted talent, and he had the courage.
That's such a perfect example of what other business leaders are able to do and follow in the same footsteps to do.
And it's more and more people who are doing it and succeeding with it.
Amazing. Well, Tyler, I really appreciate the time on a Sunday morning, but is there anything else that you would want to share with the Liberty Ventures network before we depart?
Well, just keep on going. I mean, it's not the races to the swift. This is a marathon. There's going to be a lot of setbacks. But just as succeeding in business is so much about determination, so is succeeding with ideas, and never ever give up. Movements have their high points, their low points, but the things that succeed have backers who truly believe in them and stick with it and end up changing the world in a super positive, super constructive way.
What an amazing note to end on. Really, thank you, Tyler, for everything.
Great to chat with you. See you next time.